fourth Sephirot is a Chesed. Chesed, meaning love, mercy. Let me start with an analogy. Chesed could be said to be the hand that holds and protects, and that by extension forms a fist, which is then actually Gebura. But it's a result of the holding of Chesed. It's an interesting thing if you think about how that happened when claws turned to grasping hands, if that was how it happened. And that sort of the bonus, in a sense, of the fist, of the grasping hand being the fist. It's a very beautiful, very simple way of seeing what Chesed is. Chesed is the containing, the protecting, the merciful love that needs to pertain, and this is very, very important, and it's not ever mentioned, I think. I think this is a philosophical insight into the Kabbalah that the religious or mystical schools could not give, because it's quite, it's not absolutely moral at all. It conditions morality, actually. It conditions the morality of Chesed. What Chesed is limited mercy. It is a sphere that encloses a specific world, that defines, thus, a specific world. So Chesed is essentially a dictatorship. One might say an enlightened dictatorship. Here's what I mean by that. It's not that there's an actual human dictating stuff and ruling arms and everything and oppressing people. It's that there's a single value set, a coherent, specific value set that pertains and rules over the whole Hasidic paradigm, the sphere over which the merciful love presides. So here's how in Bina we have the generality of form and of limitation. Now, so Bina becomes Chesed through Daath, and it's the next step. So then we get a limited form of form. What happens from Bina to Chesed is form, universal form and limitation unites in a limited form, which is just a form, an actual form, no longer abstract but concrete. And then we get, like, once a form has been comes into existence, not being allowed by anyone, just by the possibility of existence that I've described in the supernal triad, then the actual value logical conclusion is that whatever comes into being is the best possible option for all the parts involved. That's just how it would go. What is best? Okay, well, that's Chesed, mercy, love. That's nurturing, whatever splendorous conditions could be possible. They will arise at one point, and that's called that is that mercy, the possibility of the ultimate satisfaction, fulfillment, safety within a sphere of manifestation. Now, we can see how sanctimonious this can get. And this is all quite interesting to me, because I hadn't really, before I went to making these videos, Chesed was always the most mysterious sphere to me. And I always knew that I was missing something. Most of the rest made perfect sense to me, even though Hod is also very mysterious. But it said that Hod is an extension of Chesed, or that the splendor of Chesed can be found in Hod. Anyway, but now I get it. And I also get what's so complicated about Hod. And I also have to mention something else, that I think the tree, we should consider that in the abyss the thing flips. I would say that it is quite sensible to consider, like, the brain hemispheres rule the opposite sides of the body. We could say that Bina actually rules over Chesed and Chokmah rules over Gebura. Which makes a lot of sense given the sort of properties of these spheres, where Bina is a form stable thing, and Chesed is a world and Netzach below that is also, it's not static, but it's a place, a sphere, a realm. So that's fitting in form, whereas force, the pillar of force, I mean, Gebura and Hod are very dynamic and forceful aspects, very directly. And in that sense, we would also not have to have the problem where there's no path between Bina and Chesed. We can see how Daath is basically kind of a joint, or what do you call that? An axis where it turns, and by the change from the abstract or the metaphysical to the physical and the manifest, we some logic flips, and manifests as its own office. Okay, I'll just leave this for the very esoterically inclined, but that needed to be said, I think. I mentioned the word chesed to a Jewish kid, and he had a very strong physiological reaction of basically of awe, or of apparently these are like the 10 Sephirot are apparently words that generally are not in use. They're too exalted or too great, I guess, what they refer to just using common language. Okay, so this guy also told me that when he was once he did a Kabbalistic spell in his family house, or he was for a month or something, the electricity went out and just would not come on. And then when he did a counter spell, or sort of apologized, I guess, to these forces, immediately the electricity switched back on. So in general, it goes for also a Jewish a relative, Moshe, who passed away. When I told him that I was into Kabbalah like 10 years ago, he was he was kind of proud of me, but he was also warning me. Like he said, "Well, that's not something you're supposed to do before you're 40, and basically before you have a family and children, or very solid grounding." And I know those. I know that warning. It's a very old warning, and it's very sensible. It's just that in our times, there's a whole bunch of men that grow up without, there is nothing to respect. In this age, there is no leadership. So, Chesed, meaning mercy. It's the first Sephirot of the formative world, if we don't count Daath. And we might say Daath is where Chesed and Gebura emerge from, both. We've seen that in Daath. So, Chesed is this containing sphere. It's the merciful king, one might say, but really it's more like the priest king, the king that sets the values for the realm. The colors of Chesed are things like azure, violet, purple, the color of Jupiter, as the Romans attributed, and with like silver sparkles and whatnot. If you meditate on that, it's extremely exalted sphere of consciousness. It's extremely pleasant, clean, expansive. There's no need, once you're in that sphere with your consciousness, not something people tend to walk around in daily, but there's really no need for any other physical satisfaction. Like, once you get to the bliss of Chesed, that includes the satisfactions of the whole formative world. That's really why it's kind of hard to get there, to get to an understanding of it too. Because as soon as that thing impulse went down across the abyss, downward, and arrives at the top of the formative world, we essentially have to count for the upward logics. Now because we can't understand Chesed really without all the other elements in the equation. We cannot have a merciful sphere without the reproductive organs being healthy and all that. We cannot have it without a sane, rational mind, without a properly creative emotional world, without a moral center where we account for for the world outside of us, where the happiness of others is directly stimulating our own happiness, and without the severity of Gibura, which protects any kind of the order from any kind of excesses. So Chesed is an accumulation of all that, but it's also the thing that allows for these things to accumulate. It's a limit. It's the limit of the good. The problem with Chesed, really, I mean, I'm struggling here a little bit to explain, to get to the core of this. Normally you would not, for example with Gebura, like a protective sphere, violent sphere, known to be violent, you would not really hesitate a second to say, oh yeah, that's only right, it limits. This would contribute and this won't, so, divine justice must occur, like with science, with gravity. Some things are just necessary, and those things happen in order to, because the law, natural law, perpetuates itself. There's just no mercy. So, but that's harshness. Whereas Chesed is a sphere of all sorts of human and exalted ideas and emotions, and for those things, it's really hard for humans to accept that these are also aggressive and also exclusivist. But in this time, for example, there's this any kind of sphere where people are banned from. Like, say you have this family that believes in the socialist, liberal morality mindset of where, for example, everybody's equal. Now you have a person that is unequal to these people and believes in different things and just behaves differently. So then you get a contradiction, because the people in that sphere say, well, everybody's equal and accepted and loved. And then you have someone who's not really complying with that, or with that sort of equality, or not. He's, for example, he doesn't believe that everybody's equal. How are you going to fit that into the equation of everybody's equal? Because everybody's equal, so everybody probably believes everybody's equal, because everybody's equal, so they must believe the same thing. So, but then there's this guy who doesn't believe that everybody's equal, so he's different. That's a big problem, because then he's also right, and that can't happen. So he must be expelled. That's what happens. It's about an interpretation of love. Chesed has all the Sephirot have God names. They have all 10 Sephirot, all sorts of attributes on different levels and context. One of these things is God names. The Torah, the Old Testament, the first 5 books of the Old Testament have 10 God names. The first that's mentioned in Genesis is Elohim. Bereshit bara Elohim, I think the first word. It's a plural form. It pertains to Bina. Yes, okay, so that we have Elohim. To Chokmah pertains Yod Hevah, Yehovah. To Keter pertains Asher Eheya Asher. No, Eheya Asher Eheya, sorry. Meaning I am that I am. So not I am what I am that I am. The fact that I am is what I am. Being as such. The sphere of Chesed is El, E-L, or Aleph Lamed. Does that sound familiar? We have Raphael, Michael, Israel, Gabriel, Uriel, Tzadkiel, all unlimited amounts of L's, not unlimited, but that name simply means God. El, so Chesed is God. So we see that God is below the abyss. So above the abyss, the abstract principle is not what we would see as God, it's not the God of the world. Surely Chokmah is a Yod Hevah, it's a father figure, but it's an abstract father figure. This distinction is Yod Hevah does not rule over a sphere. It's like it's the impulse itself, like lightning or sperm or any kind of direct impulse that completely neutralizes itself in its own effect. Like once it strikes, once it does something, it's gone. Like light, like a photon. So it's a God form it gives, but it provides, but it does not contain. We first needed to go through Bina for that. So it's a masculine divine force, one might say, whatever. Even though divine, what does that word even mean? But Chesed is the God of the world, So let's say Chesed is the God or the point that determines a world and sets apart a world from other worlds. So what people have been trying to believe is that there is one Chesed, that the whole universe is enclosed in one creator's will and standards, and that it's just a matter of like humans resolving their imperfections or just killing each other before it's just affirmed that everything is one and we'll have divine law controlling everything. But let's say that the Chesedic sphere that now dominates the planet, that is most dominant, is Islam. Islam is really literal as Chesed. Not only does Chesed mean mercy, and Allah is known as the most merciful, and El is strikingly similar to Allah. We can even say that El and Elohim, Allah is in between those, so Allah could be said in Daath, which is really the crown of the formative world. But it's also that it's temples. The mosque is that the symbol of Chesed, one of the symbols, an orb. Mosque is very orb-like. The inside cannot be decorated with figurative art because that belongs to the formative world, and it can only use geometries which belong to Bina. So you have this very beautiful analogy of the Chesedic orb, which limits are literally Binaic limits, geometrical necessities, and it's inside. So this harsh limit of form itself provides for the sphere of mercy and love in which the congregation gathers and forms. It forms with quite some success. 1,300 years now, nearly closing 2 billion members. Chesed is the sphere of Jupiter, thus of expanse. Chesed always wants to expand, and that's what it's doing. So I guess I can leave it at this with the... let me just not... I don't mean to say that Islam will turn out to be the Chesedic law of this world. I don't think so. But what I'm seeing is that Islam is presenting us with the fact that we have to count with Chesed as a law that we have to be able to uphold if we want to rule in peace. So what I'm saying is that we cannot just go about with all this. Okay, it's one thing to have everybody for himself. If you really enforce that, there's a certain equality, there's a certain logic to it. But if you have this thing about globalism and banking and wealth funneling upward and filtering, extorting, exploiting, and at the same time this kind of claim to individualism, the claim that everybody is his own person. If you enslave people in debt and ridiculous brainwashing, education, and all sorts of guilt trips and idiotic dismissals of nature, you already created the conditions of a very, very radical religion of oppression that could never even, never even compete with Islam. That's the thing. Nihilism makes Chesed impossible. Because nihilism predicates that there is no superior value. And Chesed is essentially simply the fact of a superior value. So Chesed is the master signifier in Lacan's terms. We don't have that. The EU tries this with stealing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. But it's a little bit overreaching. It's not quite there yet. The EU, it's like playing the Ninth of Beethoven, on a funeral. I mean, literally, the EU is a funeral party, like after World War II gathering. That's literally what it is. How it came to be. And until some, original splendor from before the World Wars is rediscovered, because Chesed needs splendor to, like a primordial, a master signifier needs to be a splendorous thing in order to master signify. That's just how it is. We need splendor and greatness in order to have coherence and love and mercy. So lastly, Chesed, I just want to make a general remark about this whole notion of climbing. Why is this, or dividing God into 10 spheres, are making it so complicated? Whereas, for example, the Muslim world, Chesed, we can place it in Chesed, but or it's God in Chesed, but we don't need the tree to. They don't want that to know all those complicated things. They just want to bow to that thing they know is great, right? That's a very simple human bliss, a childlike human bliss, just to accept. Not that all children are prone to that sort of thing, but okay, there is something infinitely greater. That's sort of a given. Though let's just immediately accept that and bow to it. It's a very legitimate source of peace, essentially. Even though, but you have to, because the human is capable of so much more. You have to keep doing that. You have to keep, pressing yourself into that submission, and then you'll be content with that, and you'll shape yourself into a contented person who feels who feels mercy and love from this great being. That's just, you might be small and weak in terms of your worldly powers, but you'll be included, and that's what the liberals in Europe are struggling for. But they don't. Neither do they have any values to bow to, nor do they have the strength to really defend any of themselves with any kind of with an open visage. But then the other thing is, so there is this infinitely greater greatness available, so for example, bow to. What you can also do is build. You can, for example, build a ladder, Jacob's ladder. The Kabbalah, the tree of life, is seen as Jacob's ladder, and this is approaching the tree from the bottom, where you would where once you reach Chesed, you've reached. You're sort of, I guess, a Jesus type figure. And then comes into contact with the greater mysteries, with Jesus standing face to face with the abyss and Bina. That's, to me, pretty. Seems like the whole crucifixion and resurrection, all that weird stuff, magical, occult stuff, the world transforming stuff, pertains to whatever happens in the abyss. But that's actually quite interesting. Well, next we move on to Gebura. It'll be a similar story, I guess. Different focus, but similar theme. Because Gebura is the enforcing hand of Chesed.